would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundungurra land and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have survived religious trauma, left high control or cult communities, and are deconstructing their faith. I'm your host, Sam, and each week I'll talk with individuals who have taken the brave step to start shifting their beliefs that might have once controlled and defined their lives. Join us as we dig into their experiences, the challenges they've faced, and the insights they've gained. Whether you're on a similar journey or you're just curious about these powerful stories, you're in the right place. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Nita. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Sam. Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm really excited about this episode. Before we get started, where in the world are you?
I am based in Burnaby, BC. For those of you who knows the country Canada, I'm located near Vancouver, which is in the West Coast Pacific side of the country.
Lovely. Is that like a really snowy part of Canada?
That's the other side of the country.
Right.
There's this ongoing joke that we're like the not so Canada child in the country because we snowed, but then snow here doesn't really last that long, if ever. And people can use umbrella all year long because like in the summer people use the umbrella to shield them from the sun, and in the winter people use umbrella to shield them from the snow.
Right. It's one extreme to another.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like Australian weather all year round is just like one extreme to another. So I can relate to that. Okay, so I start with one very big, broad, vague question, which allows you to start wherever you feel like you would like to, which is where does your story start?
My queerness story actually just started like right when I was like around 30, like early 30s. So I personally identify as someone who, coming out later in life. Because as someone who grew up in Indonesia, a country which is pretty adjacent to where you're from,
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah, much
Like
closer than Canada.
I
Yeah.
know. A part of me actually feels a little jelly that you're way closer to my home country. I think I always looked at women differently. And this is something that I only realized like in hindsight. Because back then growing up in a very collectivistic, traditional, and conservative country, I was brought up thinking or like adopting and absorbing all of these like cis heteronormative patriarchal kind of like perspective. So I
Mm.
never knew that it was in the realm of possibility that hey, like relationships is actually not just so-called quote unquote men and quote unquote women. There's like
Mm.
a variety of things like you do you boo kind of
Yeah.
thing. So yeah.
Yeah. And so, what was it like growing up in that conservative, traditional sort of space? Was it just nationally conservative? Was it faith conservative? All of the above?
I would say all of the above. I've been doing way more self-exploration and personal healing journey actually ever since I live abroad. Because I left Indonesia as soon as I finished high school, and I lived in Malaysia for a few years, and before moving to Canada in my early 20s. And I've been reflecting a lot on how I grew up and how it really impacted the way I used to live
Mm.
because there is such like there's such an emphasis on having to like fit in
Mm,
and having to be a certain way. Like women are supposed to be like this, and men are supposed to be like that. Men are like the provider, and women are like, you know, like the feminine side. But then growing up, once again, I was often told that I am too much of this or too little of that.
mm,
Like I've always been seen, I guess, as someone who is overly strong-minded, overly assertive, and like lots of qualities that should belong to men. So people think that I'm intimidating, I'm too strong, I'm too masculine. Where like in the journey of building my own solo practice right now, I think I put in so much of that masculine energy to my advantage because I am a go-getter.
mm,
I have a very robust personality, and I'm like I know what I want and I go for what I want in life, which is like traditionally very masculine energy. But I'm like, could we just like have this whole yin and yang and this whole balance, you know, of like masculine and feminine,
yeah.
regardless of your gender, regardless of the genitals. Like it doesn't define us as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think traditionally, particularly, I mean, broadly, those qualities are deemed masculine, but I think that is amplified in religious spaces because not only are they masculine qualities, they're almost anti-women qualities in terms of women are taught in the church to be humble and meek and pure and mild and sweet. And I mean, I had a devotional trying to teach me how to become a Proverbs 31 woman, right? So, like, it's not just that they were masculine qualities, it's just that they were also not just qualities that we shouldn't have, but we should actively not seek as well, because that's just not who we were supposed to be.
Oh, definitely. Yes. I think growing up, one of the themes that I thought about a lot of the time is, was I normal? Am I
Mm,
normal? Am I okay? You know,
yeah.
because I was called a witch, I was called a bitch, you know,
Yeah.
like just because
Mm,
I say my mind kind of thing.
mm,
Whereas like people pleasing to the max is quite the culture,
mm,
like the whole saving face. And I'm not here to actually like bash the culture of my origin. Um, I having come to terms with where I came from and my own personal healing journey has really taught me actually the beauty of assimilation.
mm,
There's so much beauty in the individualistic country or like culture, and there's beauty in collectivistic culture. Because if you take like the whole doing things your way to the extreme, you have no consideration for the other people. It
mm,
hurts other people. But also if you kind of like sacrifice yourself for the betterment of society, it's like, yes, we can be martyr in one way or another, but we can't be martyr in every single aspect of our life.
mm. Yeah.
So
And I
yeah.
think, yeah, that martyr complex is such a big, uh, like that's a whole thing, is like that sort of martyr complex. In terms of the home and the family that you were raised in, what flavor of religion were you taught growing up?
I think the religion that I was taught growing up was just like be a good person.
Okay.
So I think like to a certain extent I had an okay enough starting point in terms of the way I relate to religion.
Mm,
Um, because there's such a blend in my family where my dad was is a Buddhist and my mom is a Catholic. And I've seen diversity in religion. And I
mm,
think my dad always said that it is actually not your religion who defines you, but how you show up in the world.
mm,
And I think I used to be a little angry or upset at this because I was like, oh, well, like, but religion taught you so many good things. Like, shouldn't you be good then if you're religious? Um, though growing up in school, then I actually went to Catholic school all my life. And I
mm,
remember pretty distinctly right now, like, all throughout my school time, actually, like all the way from like grade one to high school,
mm,
being surrounded by like Catholics who call and profess themselves as Catholic. And I know some of the tenets of Catholicism, the whole teaching about God is love, be charitable to your neighbor. And I've seen so many backstabbing and talking behind your back, which is like the exact opposite from what your religion is actually like promoting. So it created such a huge turmoil actually in my head. Like,
Mm,
I thought this is a good standard, but even you subscribing to the good standard does not necessarily change your behavior, does not necessarily change. Like you're so good on the
mm.
talk part, but where is your action, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of the idea that if you are only doing morally good or kind or compassionate things because your religion tells you to do so, then we've got an issue, right? If that's the only reason. And I find that that's what happens when the actions are not lining up with the belief system, is there is like a disconnect, and I mean broadly an irony, but also like a disconnect as to that. Was it confusing for you growing up having, dad being a Buddhist and mum being a Catholic? Because they're pretty different.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Um,
broad strokes, Buddhism and Catholicism are pretty different.
yeah, yeah. I think like the theme of me growing up until like I hit the number 30 in my
Mm,
age was a whole lot of confusion. I felt like I was always grappling for some sort of like standards or something like a pull, like a beacon of hope, a beacon of light of some sort. And I think that's why I also at some point I practiced Catholicism as well because I felt like, hey, like I finally found like a standard for myself, like something to subscribe to, something to go back to. Up until that point where I realized that, hey, like I am probably not as good as they think I am.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it about Catholicism at the time that you were drawn to over what your dad was telling you about Buddhism?
At the time, I think I was someone who was really believe in like signs and I was really looking, I think like I was really looking for the truth. And for a week I was actually just praying to this like some sort of like woo-woo God in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
If I and that was actually the month where I was like church hopping as well, like to evangelical, Pentecostal, and a few other denominations.
Mm,
And the next week was my roster to go to the Catholic Church. So I was just like praying if I am meant to go to be a Catholic, like give me a sign.
mm,
And I actually forgot now because it's like almost 15 plus years ago. Though something happened that kind of like confirmed my
mm,
intention for a sign. And that's why I kind of like started going to the Catholic Church regularly because I thought that's where I found a sense of belonging.
mm,
That this is where like you always know to a certain extent like what you know of today and I thought that was a sense of belonging for me. Little did I know that was just fitting in because I think I was trying so hard to like say the right thing, be a good girl, be a good person. And now I really like, oh wow, like I thought I was a good person, but it was not my good. It was good in a way that I bent over backwards according to what I've seen
mm,
in the environment, what I've seen people are doing. And I don't say things that would ruffle feathers or like I try to keep things to myself kind of thing. So like, yeah, I think growing up to that point, like I was filled with lots of chaos and confusion actually like on the inside, even though on the outside, I think I look pretty well put together.
Yeah, okay. I mean, like that theme of belonging comes up in nearly every episode that I record, which is that like
Yes.
what draws us to church spaces, what keeps us in church spaces, perhaps at times longer than we should be there,
Oh yeah.
is that sense of belonging and wanting
Oh
to be a
yeah.
part of something. Yeah. it's such a huge I think as humans we are hardwired for connection anyway, but
Mhm.
that communal sense of belonging that churches, and I'm going to use a really particular word here that's probably going to grind some people's gears, but that sense of belonging and community that churches manufacture, because in a lot of churches it is manufactured, there, it's like instant connection and instant community and instant belonging and instant love. And I'm assuming at that time you were probably like a teenager, young adult.
Yeah, I was like a teenager. I think I
Yeah.
started like going to church when I was like around 18 up until
Mm,
when I was like 30. So like
okay.
actually at quite a significant like period of
Yeah.
my life because that's like pretty developmentally as another therapist, like it's
Hmm.
pretty significant for someone's development actually.
Absolutely. That's like the part of your life where you are forming your identity. Like, who do I want to be in the world? What type of person do I want to be? Who do I want to associate with? Like, and being a part of a church during that period of time is like, what like it's a bigger question of like, what purpose am I serving whilst I'm
Mhm.
on earth? And so it's all of these like huge existential questions that like no 18-year-old should have to be trying to work out, but we
Mhm.
are because like we are people who want to feel like there is a purpose and seeking, some sort of like identity creation at that time. What was your time at the Catholic Church like?
I would say for the most part it was good for what it was. I think like the me today really cringes whenever I look back and remember like, oh wow, like I used to bend over backwards to that degree actually.
Mm,
Because right now actually like after not going to church, I've been posting pretty openly in my Facebook. Like yesterday I actually posted with the caption, like what like some people feel okay seeing women or like people with breast and vagina
mm,
wearing like baggy pants or like something that is considered masculine, but then why does it ruffle some feathers when they see someone with a penis, supposedly with a penis or masculine looking, dressed with like nail polish and hair
mm,
color and like like lip gloss and everything, like why
yeah.
why like why and I wouldn't have said that if I went to church. I think like my time I think was good for what it was, so like there are things that definitely I grieved, but then I think had I not experienced that, I also won't be able to actually relate to some of my clients who've experienced religious trauma
Yeah.
to this degree. The kind of outrage that I feel, the kind of like understanding and deeper empathy that I can offer to them,
Mm,
it's second to none, because like it's been really surprising to some people actually when they were like, oh, I thought you're gonna like instruct me whether to go to church or not, and I'm like, no, it's not my job actually to make you come out or not. It's not my job to make you go to church or not. I'm here with you every step of the way. And
mm,
I understand how hard it is for you to actually have to deal with that turmoil.
yeah.
I know it firsthand.
Mm. Yeah. I think it's that nuance that like I like loving and leaving church essentially. Like that sort of idea creates nuance and that nuance can make some people feel really uncomfortable because I don't talk about my whole church experience in a negative light or in a negative capacity. And despite the fact that there was like immense amounts of spiritual abuse and harm that occurred, uh the nuance to understand that not everything is all good or all bad is really tricky for people to understand. And also that nuance allows us also as therapists to go into those sessions and allow and give permission for our clients to also hold the same nuance and to not feel like they need to box their experience or box what all of those shoulds and expectations into a certain category, but actually, like, let's just look at the smorgasbord. And if you want to leave it as a smorgasbord, great, let's do that. That's also okay. But it's the nuance to actually like be able to hold what seem on the surface as opposing feelings or thoughts about an experience, but actually that's just human complexity, right? Because nothing is ever all good or all bad.
Mhm.
And so um, it sounds like your time in the Catholic Church served the need that you had at the time.
I was gonna say, interesting that I feel like we're not just twinning colors today, but we're twinning frequency because in my
Yeah.
head, as you're like responding, I'm like, oh yeah, like definitely, it's not something that I regret actually at all because it
Mm,
provided me fuel for my journey. Like it
mm,
helped me at the time. It speak to me and nurture me for where I was in
mm,
that moment of time.
mhm.
And had I not passed by that point in my life, I won't be where I'm at today either. So,
Yeah.
like, I can't resent that, or I don't resent that actually.
Absolutely. And I think for some of the people that I have spoken to also, and for my own story, that like church saved my life and has saved the lives of countless people. And so that is never something that would be looked at negatively because there are some people who are still earthside who, if it wasn't for the role that church played at that time, would literally not be here. And so that is always something to be thankful for. Uh, but it doesn't mean that we can't call out the bullshit and the harm and all of the other stuff as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
We can do both things. Uh,
Mhm.
was your was coming to the conclusion and the awareness around your queerness, was that what led you out of the church? Or was it
Oh,
something
heck yeah.
prior? Okay, yeah.
Heck yeah. I think it was almost like someone who's been constipated for so long and finally they actually I should have given a bit
Oh
of
my
a
gosh, this
conscious.
is no, I love this. This is I hear so many analogies. This is by far one of the best analogies. Continue. Oh,
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, it's like someone who's been constipated for so long and finally they can let it go, you know? Because there were actually like signs along the way, though I try to push it down. And this is like a theme, a recurring theme that I've heard from your podcast as well as my work with clients and the temperature on the ground when I talk to other people with similar experience, like more often than not, us claiming our queerness is nothing new. It's not like
mhm.
we woke up, like we sleep tonight and woke up tomorrow with this self revelation that we're
Yeah.
not as cis and hetero as we thought we were. Like
Hmm.
that seed of realization actually has always been there,
Yeah.
though I did my very utmost best work to like try to mute it, try to push it to the side,
Mm.
try to like sweep it under the rug, or trying to like look the other way, like basically trying to deny its existence
Yeah.
up until a certain point when I was like, you know what? This is actually real. Um, so you have the choice of either you push it down way more, though up to what level do you push it down?
Mm.
Or do you just give it space? It's not that you have to proclaim your queerness to the world
Yeah.
tomorrow, though. Can you at least just dialogue with this, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, I chose to dialogue with that thing.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to add a layer to the constipation analogy, which is I did a bonus episode with Kit Morgan, who is a trans therapist in the US, and they work predominantly with trans, gender non-conforming, and intersex clients, also who have experienced religious trauma. And they were very particular about the fact that what they've noticed in their clients is particularly for those who have had to suppress either consciously or unconsciously their gender, their sexuality, or anything like that, is that the result is gut issues, right? So, like, because if we keep literally pushing down, whether we are aware we are doing it or not, the body is going to like express that in some way, right? So I'm curious what that, because I obviously know what it was like for me, but I'm curious what that day-to-day denial, masking, whatever language you want to use, suppression looked like for you for that 15 years.
Uh, it looked like doing my like I don't think I had gut issues or like bodily problem actually.
Yeah.
So it did not necessarily impact me physically,
Mm.
my health. I mean, though on the inside, I think there's always confusion
Mm.
because I always tried my best to like find a guy,
Oh
this
yeah,
whole
didn't
thing
we
about
all?
finding a guy.
Didn't we all? I mean, and I'm bisexual and I still tried really freaking hard and it just was not happening.
Yeah, I was actually like at some point because like a couple of my ex-boyfriends were actually like the hottest guys, at least according to other people as well. Like, oh my gosh, these guys are like, if you can bag them, you're
Mm.
the shit, yo, you know?
Yeah.
So like, that kind of a rank. And I don't know why. Like whenever we made out and stuff, like the spark was just not there. And I
Mm.
used to think that there was something wrong, like
Yeah.
seriously wrong, capital wrong with me, like sexually.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I think I used to really struggle with the whole like,
Mm.
am I normal?
Yeah.
What is normal to start with,
Yeah. And I think that
Yeah.
that correlation is so important for people to understand that it's not just like a casual not bringing that to, the conscious area that like maybe I'm not attracted to these people because like maybe I'm just not attracted to them, but it is it jumps from that to there's something wrong with me, like something
Mhm.
fundamentally broken and wrong with who
Mhm.
I am that I'm
Yes.
not. And I mean, like the church does a really good job at teaching us that anyway, because that's kind of like the core tenets is that you are like really like fundamentally sinful and wrong and like you
Yes.
you suck really bad. And so we take that and we just amplify that when it comes to if I'm not attracted to this person. I've had a few people say, like, I just thought I was really good at purity culture. Like because I wasn't attracted to the guys like all of my other friends were. But actually, like I wasn't just really good at purity culture, it's just really, really gay. Um and that's not allowed obviously, and it's not just not allowed, it's not presented as a viable option. Sometimes it's not presented as an option at all and there is just like a complete lack of awareness. And so yeah, I see that so often that it's just that huge jump from like maybe I'm not attracted to guys to like I am fundamentally broken, like there's something wrong with me. And I think that that's a really important thing for people to realize that that jump happens very quickly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's where I'm like, for all the like self-questioning, self-disparaging like statements that I ask myself, it was
Mm.
actually like it was so hard to actually listen to like some preaching from the pulpit, especially those about like union and marriages and like sex is supposed to happen between men and women. And then I thought there was something seriously wrong with me on the inside because I remember pretty vividly. I used to work with someone who I found really, really attractive. A
Mm.
woman. And I fantasized actually about kissing her. And I was like, oh, what's wrong with me? Oh my gosh. And this is back in the day when I was still like a mission trip coordinator. So you could only imagine, like this job, this role. And I was someone who was pretty sought after for certain roles.
Yeah.
And this is my inner thought. So I used to think like there was something fundamentally wrong and broken, and am I dirty, am I a
Yeah.
perf, like all of these things. And even for me to say this like publicly right now, it's like I've come a long way from where I was, because like there's no way I would even say this to a friend. But
Yeah.
a podcast, you have an international listener. So
Everybody's knowing now. Oh, I'm curious what it was like for you to start, you use the term like dialoguing with that revelation or that, uh not necessarily revelation, but the dialogue around like the conscious awareness of like maybe this is me being queer, what that was like for you and how it impacted on your faith at the time.
Ooh, I think that was actually the beginning of my shift. It was the beginning of my departure. It
Yeah.
was very slow and steady departure, because I think the question that I asked myself was like, okay, like this is something that I've been thinking about. This is not my first like ever infatuation or crush or interest, whatever you call it, like towards someone of the same sex.
Yeah.
Um, so and and I was a little unhappy, I think, at myself, confused. I think confusion is one word that I use a lot to describe like how I used to live.
Mm,
So I think I gave myself a couple of choices at the time. Okay, do I continue living like a life that I bend over backwards and using someone else's standards,
mm,
of this, like, okay, I have to measure up to certain standards, right? In the church, there are like certain tenets. And I've been questioning it actually all this while. I just never really dialogue with that.
mm,
Or it was actually during the pandemic, where like we had so much time to ourselves. So I was like, in the past it was easier to distract myself with like, oh yeah, like let me just busy myself with like taking more classes when I was still in the uni, or let me host more people, for dinner, so I don't have much time and space to think about it. But
mm.
then during the pandemic, the only thing we had was
It was time.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
Yes.
I made that conscious choice to like, okay, like time. I have the time now.
Mm,
So, okay, come here. Let
mm,
me look at you face to face and actually deal with this discomfort, because this is the same discomfort that I've shelved away ever since I was probably 15. Like, I think in high school, I used to, look at women a certain way or like differently than I look at guys. But I wanted to fit in so bad. So I
yeah.
was just like, oh yeah, like she's just cute. She's a cute girl.
Yeah. What did that dialogue look like? What was that process like after such a long time of essentially, like I'm picturing like the imagery of like, imagine if you had had like a little, like an actual person or someone like following you around for 15 years and you had just like ignored them and like consciously like pushed them aside. What was it like to actually finally come face to face with that and actually dialogue with that part of you?
It felt petrifying actually at first.
Yeah.
There was so much discomfort. And because at the time I was still affiliated with the church
Mm,
to a certain degree, this decision actually caused, it was, I had confusion before, though now it's like confusion magnified. It was, like I think I walked towards a point where there was this juncture where I realized then, okay, queerness, it's this.
mm,
Cis hetero life is that. I've been living at that region of the world and I was not necessarily happy.
mm,
So is this the time to explore this part of the world?
mm,
Yes, though it was extremely petrifying because I was so filled with like lots of shame
mm,
initially, and considering like who I considered myself at the time, there was lots of like fear of like loss as well, because then I knew moving forward this is not a lifestyle or choices or preferences
mm,
that are confirmed or verified by the church, which was an organization that I was affiliated with at the time. So it was almost like extremely like devastating in so many ways to actually have to choose between me, myself, and I, or quote unquote, my sense of belonging,
Mm.
like the social life. Because then I'm like, okay, like, should I choose this life? Then I actually need to almost rebuild myself
Mm.
from the ground up, because a lot of my friends at the time were like church friends. Though, as we all know, I think seasons, living in a four-season country taught me a lot. And I think a lot, like about philosophy of life.
Mm.
All through season, summer, after summer, there comes the fall. After the fall is winter, but winter will not be here before, like the leaves will be, like the trees will shed its leaves. And I think the same, like snake will shed its skin, so I feel like at the time it was a very slow and gradual shedding of my skin, my old skin, so that I can discover like the best, better, greatest side of me. And I feel like I thrive where I'm at. And this is so weird that I notice the kind of quality of relationships that I've had before and after the
Mm.
embracing my queerness is actually different. I feel like I'm living my best life and I can care less what you think right now. Like, if
Yeah.
you happen to be on the other side of the door, I'm like, it's fine. You do you, boo.
Mm.
And I'm fine with your way of life. But just don't come to my farm. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to ruffle my feathers, like the door is right there, like just
Mm.
go, please, just go. I'm not interested.
Yeah. I'm curious how long it took you to get to that point, because I know that it doesn't happen that's not an
Overnight.
overnight process, right?
Oh
So,
no.
like, how long did it take you to get to that point where you were like, actually, if that's what you think, you believe, that's fine, but you don't get a choice to just bombard me with that?
For me personally, and I know that different everyone has their own speed and pace
Mm.
and cadence as well. Like for me, it took roughly like 3 years. So I'm in
Okay.
my fourth year right now, living openly
Mhm.
as well. And this is like even the whole embracing was a bit of steps, because like in my first year, I actually had a girlfriend at the time,
Mm.
and I like people in my inner circle knew that and was actually really surprised that like I'm one.
Yeah.
Though all of them actually in unison was saying that the people who are supposed to stick around will stick around. And this is the whole concept of, like, I've heard your other episode about the concept of chosen family. And
Mm.
I think, like, yeah, like these people are my chosen family in Canada here. Um, and this, I think, though at the time, initially, I was like, okay, like I felt more comfortable, like, with the whole identity part. Like, oh, yeah, fine, I'm queer.
Yeah.
Um, it took a while to actually really go public, because even in the beginning of me practicing, I just said that I work with queer people, but I
Mm.
never said that. And I only said that I am queer on my third year last year. And now I am in a few podcasts, including this one,
Mm.
proclaiming that I'm queer, and I actually don't have any control about who get to listen to your podcast. My hope is just someone out there, if they're listening to the whole episode, if there is like any thread in my story that they resonate with, that it can be a jolt of like inspiration for them.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, like my inspiration, I guess, for this podcast was the saying, to be seen is to be understood. And I think so much of healing from religious trauma is, yes, working with a therapist, but also in understanding that you are not alone in this, and that you are not the only person who has experienced this, and that there is joy on the other side of this. And so I love that. Um, I'm gonna like do a little preamble before I ask you this question, which is that I think there is this assumption for a lot of people that coming out as this really beautiful, like amazing, like streamers and sunshine and rainbows, and for some that is the case, and that's really beautiful. But actually, coming out can come with coming out can cost you, right? And so like I'm wondering what what you had to lose and what coming out cost you in terms of your faith and your church and friends and family.
Um, family, family not there yet. I mean, I don't think people from my hometown or my extended family would listen to your podcast. So I think I dodged the bullet there. Um,
Yeah.
and the only person in my family who doesn't know about this yet is actually my dad. And I've been wanting to tell him actually about this. Though the last time I was home this past January, he was so unhappy with me like having a hair color and tattoos. So like, okay, and he said he made that really, really, really clear. So I'm like, okay, if you're that unhappy with like external appearance, I can't necessarily imagine it bode well with him.
Mm.
Though the cost for me was actually lots of church friends. And I would actually just say like friends, quote unquote, because like the now me will not call themselves friends because like we just happen to, hang out a lot, spend time a lot in the same vicinity, same gathering,
Mm.
just because we have a unifying reason, aka religion, though on a very personal level, I don't feel like we had that much in common because whatever we talk about during church gathering was always really surfacey level. And of course, even like submitting prayer requests. And I don't really people don't necessarily go into details either. Like they just say, oh yeah, like grace for this decision, you need to make like really hard decision about work and la la la. Um, so I was really disappointed though, like in the beginning. And that was, I think, the choice that me and I'm pretty sure a lot of other people who've left the church need to make the choice, right?
Yeah.
Um, do I do I hold on to something that no longer fit? Like,
Mm.
or do I actually find my freedom elsewhere?
Mm.
And I decided to actually like good thing church was not my only life. So I would say that they were like 50% of my connections.
Yeah.
So it was like losing 50% of my connections. And the most upsetting part in me revisiting this grief is that when I stopped going to church,
Mm.
nobody checked in on me. And I'm pretty expressive. And
Mm.
when I said nobody, I mean it literally though.
Yeah.
Like nobody checked in on me.
Mm.
And that just and I only realized it actually like months afterwards because like, oh wow, like I just realized that I haven't gone to church for like months at ends and nobody actually like phoned me.
Mm.
And it actually made me realize that, hey, like, or a question more so, was there like a degree of suffering to make it worthwhile for people to check in on you because we used to go to the hospitals or like the old folks home to actually check in on people who got hospitalized, like we pray for them, we call them, we reach out to their family. But then like if a devout Catholic, someone who's been in your midst week after week after week, and people actually like said that I was one of the few youths that were like very committed to church and it was like super impressive. I was like, okay, does my absence not, like you don't feel that?
Yeah.
Surprising. I was like, huh, so much actually for all of my dedication to a certain establishment. That at the end of the day, it's like, what's next?
Yeah. The silence is the silence feels anything but silence. I think that the silence feels deafening almost. It's like a weight of like, do they just not care? Am I deemed a lost cause? Like there's so many questions that come from nothing, no contact, no words, no messages, anything. And so, that is in itself such a painful part of exiting a church system is the silence, because silence sounds lovely, but silence is overwhelming when you want anything but that. Yeah, I'm curious whether there was a difference for you in terms of exiting church and then how that interrelated to whether you left your faith as well. Like, were they synonymous or were they separate?
I would say um not as synonymous because I guess like I'm still a part of a life group right now with a group of
Mm,
people. It's still like a Christian life group.
yeah.
Though it's in a more like welcoming community. And all of them are aware that I'm queer.
Mm,
Though I haven't really gone to church because I think church reminds me of like conformity,
mm,
and standards and the herd mentality. And fitting in. And I feel like I am nothing, was it like, I'm nothing but fitting in. Or like no,
yeah.
I'm nothing about fitting in basically. So
Yeah.
like that's the only thing. Like I'm everything but fitting in right now. So like no, like I would go against my own words because the tenet of my work with clients is actually like you get to define life in your own terms.
Yeah.
So as someone who believes in the values of walking my talk, like I need to walk my talk first before I walk with other people to actually define life in their own terms.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love asking people that question because, or something in that realm, because I think for a long time, I thought that my faith had to be synonymous with being at church. And I think it's for a lot of people, there is no ability to do one or the other. Like, and there are people who sit in church every day with no faith, and there are people who sit every day outside of church with lots of faith. And so it's not a one choice. And so I love asking people that question because what it often highlights is actually church and faith are not interwoven all the time. They can be separate.
Yeah, it is. And that's where like I think back then, because in Catholicism, and you're probably aware about this, haha, me being presumptuous, is that if you miss mass 1 week, then you have to go to confession before receiving
Mm,
the Eucharist. But then right now, I'm like, I feel like I still very much am a spiritual person, though I do not necessarily want to be defined by a certain religion.
yeah.
Like I've been doing more like astrology reading and some Buddhism, just like good teaching about the tenets of how to be a good human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I find that for some people, finding their own version of spirituality and faith or whatever language you want to call it is actually driven by your values. And I mean how I think how can that be anything but wonderful, right?
Mhm.
It's interesting that you're now looking into Buddhism. I mean, the irony. We like maybe lead the conversation with dad one day about like, hey, like, really into Buddhism, also queer, but really into Buddhism, and just like sandwich it in there. I think, what has it been like for you to be able to find your own sense of spirituality on your own terms?
It's been exhilarating because
Yeah.
I even like astrology. I think I am a fairly respectful person, like in terms of like actually you have your own beliefs, then hold on to that. And it's been interesting to actually be in someone's circle who is also really into astrology and just being introduced to the whole like harnessing the power of energy healing, those kinds of things, the woo woo side of things. it's been really liberating to actually getting to know this whole like realm of energy thing. Because it helps put like my life into a different kind of perspective. Just to give an example, um, I have been so like I've been meeting with someone like once a year to do like an astrology reading, like where I provide my birth year and time.
Mm.
And they are able to dish out like a solar chart. So basically, it's like a description of how my life is going to be based on the constellation of stars in relation to where I'm at right now. Are you familiar with astrology?
A little bit, a little bit. I know a little bit about what you're talking about, but I'm certainly not an expert. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, me neither. I'm not an expert
Yeah.
either. Actually, that's what I did right before our meeting. I just met with a person actually yesterday, and we did a reading on my life, and it's been really interesting to actually have a few points confirmed. Because like, oh yeah, like I've been having intention to do ABC, and then that's what the thingy was also like saying, like, oh yeah, like your next year it's going to be impacted on this and that level, and just be careful on this and that, and you would channel most of your energy and this and that, which for me actually it's learning to one, trust the process, and two, go with the rhythm,
Yeah.
like just let things like water flows,
Mm.
you don't force water, you can't tell water to stop, you can't tell
Mm.
water to walk more. If you add more water it would walk more.
Mm.
But like it's just like, yeah, like I feel like my life is just more like water, and I feel it's actually really liberating in so many ways to, because like we live in a very capitalistic and this whole like should laden world where
Mm.
like, oh, you should be like this, your worth is defined by that, and I'm like, I don't subscribe to that.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think there is freedom in being curious about different spaces and not having to make a hard line decision, right? Like there is liberation and freedom in being able to say, I don't know, sounds cool. Let's look at it at the end of it. Might hate it, might love it, might still have no freaking idea about it, but let's look at it and explore it and to be able to do that without the pressure of having to pick a side, to pick what we want, and for that to then have to define every aspect of our life, right? Like I can be into crystals one day and forget about them for the next 4 weeks, and then suddenly be like, oh yeah, I really like crystals again, right? And it not have to be such a structured, rigid set of guidelines for us to follow, but we actually get to explore based on what we want and what we're interested in and what our values align with and all of those things. And I think that there is so much freedom that comes from that. Um, yeah.
That definitely. And actually, like as you were echoing just now, I was reminded of like your earlier question about like coming to terms with my queerness. And I think what really helped was actually like, yeah, this whole water like approach to
Mhm.
life, like in terms of trusting the process. And it's okay not to know. I mean, it's okay to know ABC today.
Mm.
And it's okay that I don't know the whole alphabet,
Mm.
tomorrow,
Yeah.
because some way or another something might pop up that is like a revelation.
Mm.
But just to trust the process, because there's this whole mentality in the world where you have to have things figured out.
Mhm.
If you're queer, if you profess that you're queer, then like, oh, like people would challenge you, like, what makes you think that you're queer? What was the
Prove,
sign? When did you first
prove it.
realize?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you
You're
have
queer,
to prove
prove
it.
it.
Yeah. And I'm like,
Uh,
even I got asked, so you said that you're queer, so what are you? And I'm
mm.
like, what do you mean by what am I? Well, there's like a whole alphabet soup in LGBTQI2IS, blah, blah, blah. So what are
Mhm.
you? And I'm like, I'm queer.
There's
I'm
a Q in
Q.
there. There's a Q in there.
Yeah, I'm Q. Is
Yeah.
that good enough? oh yeah, but then like, what are you then? Still repeat
Mm.
the question. I'm like, I'm queer and I don't feel like defining what my label is.
Yeah.
And I am actually pretty neutral with labels. Like some
Yeah.
people find it helpful to actually name their experience, but for some others, it's too restrictive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think labels can either free us or they can restrict us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, the even just like the label of Christian had an element of restriction for me. And so, but I think for those who are still like knee deep in church and in faith, that label of Christian is their element of safety. And so I think, it's the conversation around labels is so nuanced and complex because there's so many layers to even just the concept of labeling. And that's a very big can of worms that we could open. But I love asking this question, which is often it feels like there are terms um, that the church owns, right? There are like, and we feel like we can't use those terms ourselves. And so, two of the biggest things, and I notice this when I ask the question, which is two terms that to me are associated with the church are joy and peace. And so, what brings you joy and peace now outside of the church? Because, spoiler to everybody listening, the church does not own joy and the church does not own peace.
Heck yes. Oh my gosh. We need to like talk about this more from a pulpit of freedom. Um, what brings me joy? I think I am a quality time person, and I realize that as I as I accrue age, like the older I get, for a lack of a better word, like I think the more I really appreciate having genuine connections. And what I mean is that it's it's a dynamic, it's a connection, it's relationships that I feel seen and heard in the dynamic. I
Mm,
feel accepted in all parts of I am. And even if they happen to disagree with some of my life choices, that we can be adults. Like you can tell me that you disagree, but don't you dare impose your belief on me. Like to
mhm,
me, it's actually childish. It is selfish, and it's very one way because it's almost assuming that your way is the best way.
mm,
Um, and I learned that the relationships that satisfy me the most, or like I find it incredibly rewarding, is those that, I mean, of course you need to have like a good enough safety in the connection to actually call them out when they are about to do stupid shit, like
mhm.
just to remind them like, hey, are you sure this is where you're going?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. What came to mind as you were talking about it is the moral superiority that some people think that they have. And it's that pendulum thinking of I'm right, you're wrong, and I have the right to tell you that you're wrong. And it's like, actually, you don't. So shut up. But we
Yeah,
do that
yeah.
in really nice ways. And sometimes we don't do it in really nice ways because maybe they're not being all that nice to us. So, but it's enforcing those boundaries is not easy. So I also want to stress for people listening that, we say those things casually because we've done the work to get to the point where we can enforce those boundaries. But if you are at the beginning of your journey in exploring this, those boundaries are going to be really freaking hard. And at some point might not even be conceivable to put into place. Um, but if you stick with it, you can get there to that point where enforcing those boundaries so that you can experience the joy in the way that is authentic for you. Um, which is a nice little segue into what I love to finish these episodes on, which is what would you say to someone who is fresh in their deconstruction? They've just exited church. Maybe they've just realized, holy shit, maybe I'm queer. Maybe like I don't align with the gender that I was assigned at birth. Their world has just like crumbled. The foundation under their feet is crumbling. What word, advice, thought would you say to them?
Hmm. I think I would definitely say that you are where you are supposed to be,
Mm,
and it is okay to take your time.
mm,
It is okay to not have to figure it out or have everything's figured out at your fingertip right in that moment. And actually, I guess it's actually like morphed into like 3 points here. It's just be curious because we have enough judgments from the world out there about like who we are supposed to be and how we are supposed to get there, how we're supposed to live our life, how we're supposed to show up. And um, I think some people, our life is what we made out of this. Some people are, it is actually much safer for them to cocoon up and choose to live a life according to someone else's standards.
yeah.
And that's okay. But if you've been doing that and it doesn't bode well for you, then it's okay to take your time to actually like you don't even like if you want to come out like it's okay to define what coming out even mean for
Mm,
you, like how you're coming out and who are you coming out to. And that's actually one thing that I always stress with every single teens clients who are figuring out their identity, like hey, it's
yeah.
totally okay, and like definitely find your people.
Yeah.
If you are knee deep in church, then try to start finding community outside of church. Like try finding people you vibe with.
Yeah.
um and one last thing that I would love to add is actually like for some of us, culture and our place of origin does definitely play a huge factor. So
Yeah.
for those of you listening in, and if you happen to be you come from certain places like mine, like in Indonesia, like whenever I am in Indonesia, actually, I told my family that I feel like the queer side of me somewhat wilted slightly, or just like, like retreat, because I don't feel like I could necessarily let the environment is not conducive for it to thrive or to flourish.
Mm,
So it just lays dormant. And that's okay. Like just take your time.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point in that despite the fact that your sexuality, your gender, who you are at your core is beautiful and good, there are some spaces that don't create safety for those things, and safety always comes first, particularly in spaces that might feel really unsafe, and in some spaces, really unsafe physically. And so I think, that can circle back to another point that you said, which was around finding your people, in that there are so many of us out there who have walked this path, who want to and love walking the path with you. There are online communities that, if your literal existence community in like your demographic is not safe, there are spaces where you can find that elsewhere. And finding your community is such a key aspect. So I love that. Um, Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's been a wonderful conversation. I love your energy. I love the vibrancy. I love that you no longer fit the, meek, mild, good Catholic girl, because this one is way more fun. So I love that I'm interviewing that one. And thank you also for the work that you do. Obviously, therapist to therapist. I love when I know that people are creating space for people to explore this world and to explore religious trauma and spiritual abuse and all of that in a way that allows for nuance and complexity without feeling like they need to go from one box to another. So I love when I get to talk to people who are doing that all around the world. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, Sam. It's been good to actually have the space to,
Mm.
share a slice of my life. And I hope someone resonated with this story, and if it can be something for you to munch on.
Mm.
Because I would say, like, one thing that surprised me the most in me telling my story is like, oh wow, like I resonate with that. I resonate with that. So I'm like, oh wow, like I'm happy because like the first time, like it's vulnerable actually, like, like telling our story. Though I feel like theories uh theories tell you facts, but story connects. And I
Yeah.
think I'm, as someone who is like very community minded, I'm all about connection.
Mm. I love that. Thanks, Nita. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Surface. I hope you found today's conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from these stories. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more content. I love connecting with all of you. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you're not alone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep moving forward. Take care.